guys, so I want to get back into Hope Never Dies. We are in chapter 9. We just finished chapter 8. And chapter 8, one of the train managers Biden went to the scene of the crime because Biden wanted to look around. And now we're leaving that. Nothing was really found out. We're just kind of trying to fill things out, see what's going on. So, chapter 9. Wilmington Station's official name is the J.R. Biden Jr. I left out a whole word. My brain can't handle this. Why am I doing it? Okay. Wilmington Station's official name is the Joseph R. Biden Jr. Railroad Station, though nobody uses it. Everyone still calls it the Wilmington Station, which just shows they shouldn't name places after people until they're dead. Oh. Thing is, this isn't the only place in town bearing my name. The city also renamed the public pool after me, the Joseph R. Biden Jr. Aquatic Center, down at the corner of East 23rd and North Locust. It's a pretty poor neighborhood. I worked as a lifeguard at the pool while putting myself through college. The other lifeguards would ask me questions about race relations because I was the only white guy many of them knew. We learned a lot from each other. One black lifeguard asked if I had a gasoline can he could borrow. He wanted to see his grandmom in North Carolina. We can't stop at most gas stations. Yeah. Shit. That would have been during the civil rights era. Oof. We can't stop at most gas stations down there, he said. The pool was where my commitment to civil rights began. I hadn't fully understood what black folks were up against until then. I would have felt better if they renamed the pool after Martin Luther King Jr. or a local black politician, but the neighborhood appreciated that I never turned my back on them. I never turned my back on anyone. That just wasn't something a Biden did. And it wasn't something I could do to Finn. The station was full of commuters. Rush hour was just beginning. I slipped through the crowd with my shades on, unnoticed, headed for the newsstand and grabbed a bottle of water. Spending the afternoon outdoors in a black wool suit, because he'd left the funeral. He was at the funeral earlier. This has only been 2 days. It's a wild journey. Suit had left me thirstier than a dry road. When it came to Finn's death, Grant said he was just as stumped as me. He had never seen any signs that Finn did any drugs. Was it possible to hide addiction that well? Perhaps we were just too close to Finn to see the truth. Dan Capatori, we're going to go with Capatori. It's easier to say, even if it's not right. Had seen all the evidence firsthand and was convinced this was nothing more than an overdose. Could it really be that simple? Maybe the truth was staring me right in the face. Grant had said one interesting thing. He turned over the security tapes from the station to the Wilmington PD, but didn't think they would shed any light on the situation. Why is that? I asked. We've got 4 cameras set up there, all of which record direct to VHS tapes that are older than some of the sneakers in my closet. The most they'd be able to see is Finn getting on and off the train for work the day before. Those tapes have been taped over so many times. It's a miracle if they could even make out any details through the grain. Another victim of government belt-tightening. What else is new? I believe Grant was right about the tapes. Even if there was a crystal-clear digital footage of Finn the day before the accident, it wouldn't amount to a hill of beans. Grant knew that Finn was on time for work that day, and that he'd worked a full shift. That was nothing out of the ordinary, at least from his recollection. There were still the next 16 odd hours to account for, which I was able to reconstruct from articles in the paper, what Dan told me, and Grant's story. Finn had gone home, or maybe to visit his wife at Baptist Manor. Grace had been away at school. She had a place near campus with a couple of roommates. There wouldn't be any cell phone records to trace Finn's movement because Finn didn't carry a cell phone. He was one of the last holdouts of our generation, I suspected. Hated the damn things with a passion. I hated them too. But you couldn't deny how much they'd changed our lives. How much they'd changed the world. And yet I knew that even if he had been carrying a phone, even if we could trace his movements through cell towers it pinged. A trick I'd seen on Law & Order more than once. It would only beg more questions. I limped past the shoe shine stand. The elevator was empty, but there was a dark-skinned man sitting hunched on the bench, counting cash inside a zippered money bag. A newsboy cap covered his eyes, but this was no newsboy. This was Greg McGovern, a.k.a. the mayor of Wilmington Station. He knew everyone who passed through the station with any regularity. If anyone went into the station, he knew about it. I took a seat in his chair. The pain in my knee momentarily went away. He had fallen and his knee gave out on him. The mayor didn't look up. "Be with you in a moment," he said, his voice crackling like an old record. The mayor was my senior by at least a decade. It had been about that long since I'd seen him too. The last couple of times, there'd been a young man shining shoes in his place. I sort of figured the mayor had retired. I'd figured wrong. "Take your time," I replied. He froze. And slowly met eyes. Aw, okay. I read ahead and it jumbles me up. He froze. I don't mean to. I do it. He froze and slowly met my eyes. His face was webbed with creases. "Amtrak Joe. Didn't expect to see you around here. How's the missus?" "She's good. Still teaching." The mayor zipped his money pouch and hid it in a drawer. He didn't have any family. All he had were the commuters who passed the time with him in this worn out chair. The cracked leather seat was so badly in need of replacing, just as it had been my first visit in the 70s. Back then, the mayor had been a young man, just like me. And years had chewed us up and spit us out like tobacco. He took one of my shoes in his hand. It was covered in dirt from the field. He didn't say anything as he got to work on it. He'd seen much worse in his day. "Just came from Finn's service," I said. "Uh-huh. You following the news?" "I hear things," he said. "Good things or bad things?" He shook his head. "Just things. The police said it was an accident, that Finn got high and stumbled onto the tracks." "High on what? Life?" "Heroin." The mayor paused, then resumed his work. "I've never seen him take a drink," he said. "We'd played cards together, Saturday night. Me, him, Alvin, and Grant. Knew him as well as you can know anybody, I suppose." "You hear anything interesting about him?" "Interesting? Yeah," I said. "I'm trying to figure out what happened, how he ended up out there on the tracks, where the drugs came from." He glanced from side to side without looking at me. He was scanning the crowd for somebody to rush in as if he gave the wrong answer. He didn't trust me. "If the police say he was on drugs, then it must be true," he said. He gave my shoes one last pat with his rag. "Sure was nice to see you, Mr. Vice President." "It's just Mr. Biden now." "I suppose it is. Anything else, Mr. Biden?" He still had a smile on his face, but he'd shut down. He had every right in the world not to trust me. If I was coming off too much like a cop, it was because I didn't have any time for pleasantries. I pulled my wallet out, but he waved me off. "This one's on the house." My hand hesitated on the 20, but I handed him a business card instead. Jill had designed them for me when we started our foundation, but I've been slow to give them away. Too many strangers already had my number. The mayor fingered the card and glanced up at me. "In case you guys need another card player sometimes," I said. "What do you play?" "Gin rummy." "Rummy," he repeated. "You any good?" I grinned. "It's been so long I can't remember." He nodded, but I could tell from his skeptical expression that he was trying to figure me out. My mind was as sharp as a switchblade. I remember the last time I played gin rummy, just as I remember the first time, and every time in between. It was the only card game I had ever held my interest, because it was the one of the few where memory and strategy weighed more than luck of the draw. I wasn't interested in playing cards, though. I was interested in getting to the bottom of this whole business with Finn. So far, I wasn't being quick to point fingers. That has a way of blowing up in your face. But I also wasn't going to dilly-dally. Dan Capitore had made it clear that the Wilmington PD was content to sit back and wait for toxology reports. That wasn't good enough for me. I grabbed a water bottle at the newsstand. Another one? Another one! And joined the short line for the register. I didn't recognize the cashier. That happened a lot more nowadays than it used to. People moved around the country more, especially the younger generations. They followed their jobs, their heart, their intuition. Picking up roots was easier to do than putting them down. Of course, my family had moved from Pennsylvania to Delaware once upon a time. We'd been outsiders. As much as I like to think of Wilmington as my town, it had been someone else's first, and someone else's before that, all the way back to the first known settlers, the Lenape Indians. So Lenape, I think. That's how it's phonetically. Alright. My phone buzzed with a text. It was Jill. She was going to be late. Could I find my own way home and thaw out the chicken, she wondered. Is that all? A voice asked. I looked up. Oh, sorry, I told the girl. Just the water. She was ringing it up. The flower bouquets on the counter caught my eye. And one of those. It was an impulse buy, an $18 impulse buy. I couldn't identify any of the flowers. Heck, they could have been weeds for all I knew. But they were pretty, and I wanted Jill to have them. That's sweet. Outside, I fired up Uber. My ride would be there in 7 minutes. It was rush hour, but it was also Wilmington. Traffic never got as bad as it did in D.C., thank God. I texted Jill telling her I was on my way home, and the chicken would be thawed for time and dinner at 6. A black Cadillac Escalade pulled up to the curb in front of me. The truck-sized SUV sat there idling. Was my ride early? If there was an Uber sign on the dash, I had no way of knowing. I couldn't see anything through the heavily tinted windows. Suppose this wasn't my ride. Suppose it was some enemy of the state, some deranged lunatic fixated on a former vice president. Suppose Finn wasn't the one who'd left the printout my address behind the train. My heart rate began to ratchet up. I had no Secret Service protection anymore. No private security. I didn't even have my own pistol. Because who brings a gun to a funeral? You've not been in the South. Anyways, the vehicle just sat there, towering over me. There was nothing stopping a passenger from rolling down one of the windows and poking me full of holes. I was a sitting duck, with no wings to carry me away. I inhaled sharply and squeezed... No, I'm reading ahead again, I'm sorry. I inhaled sharply and squeezed the bouquet tight. Water dripped out of the bottom and onto the cement. The tinted window lowered. Need a lift? Barack Obama asked. I love it. It's so good. It's so good. Nothing has been cleared up at all. We're still completely wrapped in this mystery of Finn's death, why Finn had drugs on him when he was not even a drinker, let alone anything else, never showed any signs of anything like that, and then also had a map of Biden's house, like a Google map of Biden's house. So let me know what you guys are thinking. I'm really enjoying it. I hope you are too. I know I'm not the best reader out louder person, but I didn't want to just sit at home and read this. I wanted to share it. It's really, really interesting. It's really good, and I'm surprised by it. But yeah, I hope you guys are liking it. I'm gonna read it till the end, even if you don't like it. We're a quarter of the way through, so yeah. And boop it. click that like button and subscribe, and I'll see you guys in chapter 10. Hope you have a great night. Bye.